Next up, podcast listeners, Nick Sandmann, who got a settlement from CNN and apparently others, weighs in on the Rittenhouse matter. So it was actually the lawyer to Nick Sandmann who obtained a settlement, obviously a cash settlement, from CNN and others, talks about Rittenhouse and says, maybe Rittenhouse should go right to the top. So in 2018, Nick Sandmann found himself the subject of national scorn after a selectively edited clip of him smiling awkwardly while a Native American activist banged a drum in front of him amid a boisterous confrontation between a number of parties outside the Washington Monument following the March for Life. Sandmann, sporting a MAGA hat along with many of his fellow Covington High School students, was portrayed by a number of prominent outlets as having taunted the activist. Those outlets absolutely should have known better than to lift their reporting from a short clip that went viral on Twitter. Several of these outlets have had to pay sorely for their bad reporting ever since, and Sandmann is set for life. In this case, it was the establishment media complex taking cues from outraged Twitter mobs that spun the narrative, implying that Sandmann was something he was not. In the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, however, who was portrayed by the establishment media as a white supremacist militia member after shooting 3 rioters in self-defense in Kenosha, burned following Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. The inevitable defamation suits will likely take aim at an even bigger target, the President of the United States. Todd McMurtry, who helped Sandmann reach a hefty defamation settlement with CNN, told Fox News last week that he thinks Rittenhouse may very well have a solid case against now President Joe Biden, who used the teenager's image and implied he was a white supremacist during the 2020 campaign. So podcast listeners, this is important. Okay, here's why it's important. Because it wasn't just Joe Biden saying that Rittenhouse was a white supremacist. He actually said so and had the image of Rittenhouse when he used the term white supremacist in campaign videos and literature. So imagine being a kid, you're still a teenager, so you're a child still, and you have a guy running for president of the United States as a Democrat nominee and eventually becomes the president, and he runs an ad and says, well, here's an example of white supremacism in the United States, and it's a picture of Kyle Rittenhouse. Imagine putting yourself in that situation. So anyway, not only did Biden suggest that Rittenhouse was a white supremacist on CNN shortly after the teenager shot 3 rioters in self-defense in the fiery riots last year, the candidate also included an image of Kyle with his AR-15 rifle in a video he tweeted out as part of a montage of white nationalists and Proud Boys in Charlottesville and elsewhere, along with audio of Chris Wallace asking Trump to disavow white supremacists. The suggestion was far from subtle. Rittenhouse was being portrayed as a white supremacist by a man running for president. And when Rittenhouse was found not guilty by a jury in Kenosha on felony homicide and attempted homicide charges on November 19, after it had already been exhaustively established that he in no way held to white supremacist ideology, it was a sitting president who had egg all over his face. Quote, what you take from that tweet is that Kyle Rittenhouse was using his rifle and engaging in white supremacist misconduct, so it's actionable, McMurtry said, adding that such a case wasn't necessarily going to win, but it is actionable. The attorney also noted that as Biden was not yet president at the time, he wouldn't be able to benefit from any kind of executive or congressional immunity. That is where we're going with this. Biden was a candidate when this video was cut and when it was produced and when it was broadcast, including promoted. He was a candidate. So he doesn't get sovereign immunity. He doesn't get some sort of executive immunity as a result of doing it. And so what you see here is the McMurtry, who is the former attorney for Nick Sandmann. And Nick Sandmann, of course, is set for life because I don't know how much CNN paid him. It was because I'm sure there was
I think it was 250 mil.
Was it 250 million? Because usually those settlements, Chris, are confidential and you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that you're never going to tell anyone. But let's just assume it was 100 million, right? And you're Nick Sandmann. You're probably never going to have to work again. And the point here, podcast listeners, is this. We have to make sure that the media pays heavily for this, not because as conservatives that we're trying to cancel the media. Oh no, we're not trying to cancel the media. What we're trying to do is to hold them to account. If we can hold the media to account, then we will probably have some pretty significant corrections in the media, whereby the media from that point forward says, we might want to make sure that we double, triple, and quadruple check our facts before we actually put them out there, because we don't want to have to pay $200, $300, $400, $500 million again. And I know that you're probably saying, oh, well, that's nothing for them. Actually, it is a lot of money for the media because CNN and MSNBC have such small audiences. I'm not really sure how much revenue they have per year now, but it's got to take a huge bite into their revenue. And even if they have insurance that pays part of it, imagine being an insurer from that point forward going, you might not be insurable. We're not going to insure you anymore for libel because you guys say so much junk and so much inappropriate stuff. Why on earth would we want to, in any way, shape, or form, insure you? So this is the correct way in America to fix the media moving forward. And boy, do I hope and pray that Rittenhouse takes CNN, MSNBC, The View, the President of the United States, and others to the cleaners with suing them for libel, because the alternative would have been that this guy could have spent his life in prison for doing nothing more than exercising his Second Amendment right to self-defense.